My name's Andrew. I'm gonna do my best to take care of this conversation as best I can, and just like a tiny bit of background. The first thing I want to do is how I like to start everything is because we can't all be sitting in a room together, and we can't breathe together. I would like to, no matter how dumb you think it is, everyone across the world, wherever you are, I would like us to all at the same time, because this is live right now, I'd like to take a moment and take 3 breaths together, and we'll just let it happen. All right, here we go. Just breathe out. There you go. Yeah. Cool. All right.
I only did 2.
You only took 2. I'm sorry.
I was freaking out the time.
Am I shallow breathing? I gotta check myself.
I think so.
You were like, breathe out, whoo, and then I was like, wait, do we breathe in? My lung capacity is incredible because I was just breathing out for like 2 minutes.
Sorry. I'm also a little nervous. So as you can probably tell.
Well, you look great.
Thanks. You look great. Good fashion choice today. As you're aware, we're all together in time. We're temporally together, but we're not spatially together in space. And what I do primarily is I'm a performance maker, and usually that requires people to be in a room together at the same time. And I'm very excited about that. And a little bit about how this came together before I introduce everybody is I got an email from some folks all across the land who I've worked with saying like, hey, now that we're in this situation, can you, do you have like artist talks to share? Do you have performances to share? Do you have any video that we can put online to keep engaging with our audiences? And I said, I do, and I don't want to give it to you. And I want to figure out why I don't want to give it to you, because I have a very strong reaction to it. No, definitely not. I don't want to do that. I want to do more than that. Because video is a medium, and I don't just want to point one medium at another medium and say like, here's your thing. I want to engage, and want to have the conversation around why I feel so strongly about the fact that one form is not another form. So that's where it started, basically. And Kira and Sophia Brown sort of said, great, well, let's have that conversation. Like, get some minds together and let's try to do it. And so I reached out to the smartest people I know, and they're here. They all said yes. And
by the other minds you curated in, just by the way.
What's that?
I said they are very smart, and it's quite intimidating, but I'm going to put my big girl pants on.
Yeah. Right. Sure. I have all of your bios in front of me, but I guess I'm not gonna read those. I'm gonna go around and
we're all shaking our head.
Yeah. It's just for me because because language will become tough at some point for me. And a couple of things is that every time I watch an artist talk, everything seems so clear, and like people have these succinct answers, and it's and there's this almost performative aspect where it's like, well, as this institution, we're doing this and we're thinking this, and we've really seen a lot of this, and that always, I'm like, oh my God, they have it figured out. I don't have it figured out. And so I want to be here to ask a lot of questions, way more questions than I have answers to. And I hope that you all have questions as well, meaning the panelists and the people who are watching this. And so the people who are watching this, I would love, my chat is open, and I will designate myself as like de facto moderator for this time. And so anytime you have a question or a comment, just put it up there in the chat, and I'll do my best to integrate it into the conversation. But also know that this conversation will hopefully last like another 45 minutes, and then there'll be dedicated time at the end to like just have a Q&A with the people that we have. So know that that's coming. And I also will probably just link to some documents, because I asked all these panelists to sort of like read a little bit of what I've been reading and consuming what I've been consuming. But also, I have my own perspective, I have my own experience, and very soon I'll shut up about it and get some other experience in here. But that's all I have. And so I have blind spots. We all have blind spots, and I want to hear from everybody. I want it to be an open conversation and not something that is. I want us to all have our hands on the steering wheel. Super dangerous, but also we might drive in a better direction if we do that. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to leave it for all of you to introduce yourselves. Maybe how you like to be referred to, and what it is that you think that you do, or what you're thinking about these days, or what medium you work in, and then I'll have a follow-up question to that pretty soon. But anybody want to start?
I can start. Why not? I'm Rachel Chavkin. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am primarily a director. And mostly my medium has been theater performance that has really ranged in spaces from like 50-seat performance spaces to now more recently on Broadway. So I have Hadestown on Broadway. Well, not right now, but generally speaking. And I work equally between I work with a storyteller composer team that are amazing named James and Jerome that I recommend Googling if you've never, right, Kamal? They are incredible and feed my soul in so many ways. And then I also work with big ass musicals such as Hadestown. And then I sometimes work in film. I've made a short, and I've incorporated a lot of film, including working with Andrew Yu as a DP on a few things. And now I'm preparing for my first feature. So I've been sort of girding myself to for this whole new medium. And I grew up watching like 8 to 12 hours of television a day, actually, as a latchkey kid. I'm not exaggerating.
Same here, yeah.
Love it. So I'm kind of returning in some ways to a home, but one that I haven't thought about with like my adult arts brain up until recently again. And then I'm also maybe going to be working in podcast form. So I've been doing some in like fiction-based podcasts. So that's a storytelling medium that I've been thinking about a bit now. That's all. That's what I'll say for this time being.
Who are you going to pass it to?
Oh, well, Raj at Feather Kelley is a dear collaborator and friend of mine. So I'll go to Raj.
Hi, thank you. Lovely to be here with you all. My name is Raj Feather Kelley. My pronouns are he, him, his. I worked primarily as a dancer for a number of years and performer, touring with a bunch of companies. And then I started my own dance theater and media company called The Feather Theory in 2009, for which I've been making dance theater and media for. Like Rachel, I grew up watching 8 to 12 hours of TV every day. And I don't know if I've stopped that, so I certainly do that still. And that's where a lot of the work that I make for my company comes from. We love dealing with popular culture and sort of excavating that. And in the past couple of years, I've been working as a choreographer for off-Broadway work, and wonderful collaborations with Rachel on big musicals. And yeah, that's what I do. And I'm a teacher. I teach quite a bit. Teach it all the time. I will pass it to Kamal.
Oh, I'm so excited to be on the call with you guys. So thanks for passing it. My name is Kamal Sinclair. I'm currently the executive director of a collective of individuals together called the Guild of Future Architects. And my background is I started out as a dancer. I went on my first professional tour at 9 years old, and then again at 12 through Southeast Asia. So I got kind of the early experience of my first 27 years of my life was all live performing arts. Went to Tisch, Experimental Theater Wing, was a cast member of Stomp for 6 years. And then 9/11 hit. I had my own theater company, theater dance company up at that time in the 90s called Universal Arts. And we were doing productions kind of at the intersection of, that kind of, like a lot of the noise funk folks and Stomp folks and Boogie Down Productions folks. It was like this fusion of hip hop, huffin' and poetry, very much hip hop theater before that became a term. And then 9/11 hit when I had a play up at the Henry Street Settlement called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And my life changed dramatically because I was in the buildings on 9/11, and I ended up having to change my practice at that time in a lot of ways. But it led me into a space that's, I would say, is kind of radical producing at the intersection of art, science, technology. And now I went from there into pure live production, into looking at transmedia production, and ended up working on a project called Question Bridge Black Males, which was a landmark project in transmedia art production and interactive documentary that's now at the Smithsonian. And that led me to Sundance, and I ran the New Frontier program at Sundance for emerging, not only emerging disciplines, but also looking at this kind of intersectional look at making meaning through art at the intersection of art, science, and technology for a long, long time. And now that has kind of led me into a space where we're working with people to use the power of narrative and imagination to quite literally imagine better systems for our futures and bring those into being. And I pass it to Lars.
Those are such big girl pants, Kamal. I didn't know you.
It is definitely crazy.
I didn't know you were in Stomp for 6 years.
Oh yeah.
I'm thoroughly intimidated.
Holy shit.
The intimidation is now back.
Oh please! We were off Broadway. Y'all are Broadway. No?
My Broadway credit is Skittles, the musical.
I love that.
My Broadway credit.
I've been telling people about that story since I heard it at Brown. Oh my God, amazing.
Hi, y'all. My name is Lars Jan, and I'm a director. I guess I was thinking I was a director for a long time, and I think I probably am. Maybe I'm more of an author in the sense that I do write, but mostly when I direct things, I don't direct things that were already written for the most part. And then a lot of the things that I make don't have words. So I'm interested in, complex ideas, I suppose. And making things that I don't know how to, I don't see other places, and I need to get out of myself somehow, or I guess that's where they start anyway. And then I guess the artistic director of like an ephemeral idea of a company called Early Morning Opera, which is like a collaborative name for people that I work with, some frequently, some just one-offs. It's an ever-expanding network of collaborators, and I like the mission for that organization is really about, or that network is an interest in live audiences, which to me is the most interesting thing about theater, and then also an interest in emerging technologies and something like vaguely called unclassifiable experience. And those things are still all interesting to me as an artist, and also as like a receiver of culture and a human being. Like those are all things that feed me still. I don't know if I'm continuing to work in that collaborative framework, although I'm going to keep collaborating. I love collaboration. And then I've developed over the last 6 or 7 years. I started as a photographer when I was 12. I started taking pictures and wandering alone a lot. And then I didn't consider myself an artist until I discovered the theater in college. But I've been taking a lot of more pictures, especially pictures of different kinds of performance work. So I think I see that's just part of a solo practice that I have too. So I feel like one of the things that I do is I gorge on collaboration, and then in order to kind of like regain some kind of balance, I have a little bit of a solo practice where I make prints in a studio by myself, and then I kind of stuff myself and gluttonize with other people. Some kind of boom bust cycle like that.
Thanks, y'all. Now I'm intimidated all over again. Yeah, so a diverse range of media and thought and action, and I have a lot of questions that I wrote down, and some of them are very general, some of them are very specific. A lot of them revolve around liveness and what is liveness, and liveness in one medium versus liveness in another medium. But with something I keep coming back to, or maybe the distillation of other questions lies in this very broad and I don't know how this first question is going to hit us, but I keep thinking about all of the medium that we exist in, and all of the medium that we do, probably. I mean, I argue that all art is time-based art, but we can leave that for a different time. But I do think that most art is human beings telling stories about ourselves to each other, and usually in order to get better at being human, maybe. Like, I would hope that that's true. And so with that in mind, what the first thing I'd like to propose to respond to is, why do you think that the medium that you work in still exists? Or like, what is the medium that you work in good at?
Those are two very different questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which one were you going to answer, Raja?
I don't know. I thought that when you asked the second one, it was going to further, help me clarify the first, and then I was like, whoa, then my brain went in two different directions.
All right.
But I think I would prefer to answer the first, but because the second one's harder, so maybe I'm going to think about the second one. But so if you're ready, please go, Rachel.
Oh, I mean, well, the first thing that popped in my brain when like thinking about why does it still exist and what is it good at? For me, the same image comes clear, which is like I'm seeing Andre DeShields, who plays Hermes in Hadestown. Like there's like a typically in a normal audience, there's like applause as everyone hits the stage, because the entrance is like is very purposefully like a concert where the band just takes the stage. And to me, that goes to the liveness that you were talking about, is because obviously very often theater pretends that it's not live. Which is very odd to me, and I tend to be most interested in theater that is consumed with being live, and so I'm just thinking about, like, typically there's applause as the audience takes the stage. I may have to go help a baby in a moment. And then there's quiet as Andre like gathers people, and he looks at the audience and he says, all right, to the cast. He says, all right, to the audience, and the audience says it back. And so, and there's that thing that's gotten talked about a lot of, that seeing film, particularly comedy, together with an audience is much funnier than watching a comedy film at home alone. And so I think there is like a reinforcing feeling that comes from being part of that experience, which I do think theater does particularly well, because it can literally breathe and bend and feed off of that palpably. So I don't think theater always does that, but I do think it can, and certainly I think it does that really well.
Yeah, I mean, just one little insight on that I observed. I went from live performance where, there was just something about the liveness, the real-time synergy. I would literally imagine, like, when we would all hit, you know, this kind of beat at the exact same time, which ironically was kind of rare. Like 1,000 shows or whatever, you know, just like really just absolutely the same time. It was like Kundalini, euphoria, orgasmic, like something that I could not, as long as I've been in digital spaces, I have not seen replicated. And often people ask me, when will immersive media be immersive media? And I was like, to be immersive, I mean, if ever it could achieve that moment where, you know, 8 people with an audience feel this vibration of whatever that is, that intangible thing that you can't describe at the same time, that's the thing. And I don't know if digital spaces will ever be able to do that, but it was interesting to see how when virtual reality came on the scene in that world, it was the thing that people most had the negative reaction to was the isolationism of that. And until we were able to do the first social VR where everybody was in a room at the exact same time, seeing the exact same thing, going at the exact same time, people didn't even, you know, it was the turning point. And so, and they still wanted to be physically together even though they were in these individual headsets. So what is that about? You know what I mean? Like there's something about the liveness that is critical to our sense of the, you know, what creates a deeper, richer sense of meaning making. So just an observation why liveness is so critical.
I mean, to go on the, you know, to like stay on track with the sort of theme of dance, now that we're talking about that Kundalini moment of togetherness. When I was a little kid, we moved to North Carolina, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by all this Afghan family that I didn't know. And they had this tradition of getting all the kids at some point, kind of after dinner, to dance in like a circle of all of the adults who were just drinking like their 8th cup of tea. And I hated that. Like I basically did it once and I found it so alienating, I never did it again. And I was the only kid who like abstained. And the kids got such a high from performing in front of all of the adults, but I would stand outside the ring of adults feeling more alone than I'd ever been. And I feel that way in the theater a lot of the time, actually. I don't feel together with audiences very often. And I find that experience to be very true to my experience of the world, but I appreciate receiving that in an intense dosage when I'm in an audience. But it's not always like that, right? There are the moments when other things get bridged. But in terms of immersive experience and liveness, my favorite, like my aspiration really is to feel what I feel at a good dance party in other places. And that usually involves me not watching, right? There's this like Japanese, I can't remember, I'm gonna butcher it, but there's like, I lived in Japan for a little while, and I remember there's a island tradition where there's like where the entire town basically dances, and they start doing these choreographed moves down a street, and there's a song that they sing together, and the upshot of the song is like this refrain that is, the watching fools and the dancing fools are the same, so why not dance? And it's basically about like pulling people off the edge of the parade route onto the street so that there are no people watching. That's like the goal of the choreography. So to break down the barrier between like the watching fools and the dancing fools. And so in terms of embodiment, and it's like a question of like, I'm not talking about participatory theater, but I think you can participate mentally even if your body's not involved. But I know that for me, a huge part of the future feels like, how do I get my body more involved in the thing that I've come to know as the story? Or if it's not a story, the experience, and I don't need it to be a narrative, I don't need there to be characters, but how do I get more involved in more experiences with my body? Because stuff happens when I get involved with my body, like on my feet where I'm moving, that just doesn't happen ever otherwise, even in a great theater show that I'm connected to and I think is beautiful if I'm sitting in a chair.
I think I have to say something now, right?
You don't have to.
Well,
don't have to.
I feel like your question in some ways, and maybe it's just right now, but like the particular moment that we are all in, I'm like, isn't this is that same question is also the reason why I do it. I don't know if I actually know. I'm always like, why is this so cool? Like, what is, why is this still happening? Why is this so enjoyable? Like, why is this, you know, what can be done with it? Like, it makes the impossible possible. I kept thinking about magic. I was like, it's like real magic. It's like real magic. It's like we make magic. We're like magicians. And that, I don't know. I think that question is the question that I'm always asking in the rooms that I'm in. You're like, why does it still exist? And there's, it's like, it's so impossible, and we make the impossible possible. I love it. I don't know. I'm feeling really
and
romantic about it, but I think it's true. I'm like embarrassed at how romantic I sound, but I really believe that. I really believe that we're like magicians, and that's like that question really drives me each time I'm making something with people. It's like, wow, this exists because it has to, because I exist, because my curiosity is endless, and when matched or paired or intersect with someone else's curiosity, infinity just doubled. And is that possible? Like, that's wild.
And just one more. Oh, I was gonna say, if you want to go first. Rachel, did you want to go first? Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm umming because that's how I tend to watch response. Yeah,
for sure. Well, it was interesting because I remember, okay, so I may be a little bit older than the rest of you, but I was during that like quarter life crisis generation of Xers that like, oh my God, we haven't made $1 million by 25 because of the kind of rise of the internet and all that kind of stuff. And I remember being at, having just invested 5 months of time, blood, sweat, tears, with, 27 performers, and we were playing an 80 seat house in the Lower East Side. And we killed ourselves to make this amazing thing that literally blew the roof off. I mean, I still have people coming to me and going, oh my God, that changed my life. Kind of that moment, this kind of temple of theater thing that happened in the 90s. And I remember going, oh my God, we just used all of that life energy and only, 80 times 3 weeks, we did maybe 3 shows a week for 3 weeks. And I was like, man, how could that thing get, kind of amplified to affect more people? And obviously, having been in Stomp, I knew that constant touring was one way that those kind of live things can get to some level of scale. But I kept wondering about the scale thing. And I was kind of jealous of my filmmaker friends at NYU at the time that did the same amount of work, blood, sweat, and tears, but their thing lived into antiquity and could travel over time and can travel over space. And it still had emotional, cathartic stuff happening with their audiences. And I was like, man, how do I get a better return on this energy investment? Not even financially, just like, this is an amazing thing that happened. How can more people know this amazing thing happened? And that's when I got really interested in the transmedia work, because people were basically using the interactivity to try to not only drive to this live thing, but also to amplify it in a digital way. So you really had this kind of interplay between really rich live experiences and this interplay. But what was interesting about being on the transmedia producer side of things, we would, I would work on projects for commercial stuff in LA that would like have 10 million people playing inside of the fiction online, and maybe only 300 would show up to the live event, right? But there was this interplay between the 300 and the 10 million in terms of fan, conversations and all this stuff. But yet, and still, I don't know, it was interesting because those live events weren't being made by necessarily theater people, and they were missing. And I realized being in the liveness of those events on the backside, not the cut up nice reel of it, is that most of it was this empty space that didn't have the kind of climactic, amazing kind of arc of experience that theater makers make. So there's still something about liveness that has a craft to it. It's just not just being in real space together, but having this crafted thing that's why it's theater and not just everybody being together in a live space. You know what I'm saying?
Mm. Yeah, that there's that you're being taken care of by somebody, and that they're taking care of you in real time, and not across time. And everyone has the same sensory input, and there's no question about, you know, I think about in the interactive work that I've done, it's always like, how do you control your circumstances? How do you confine your circumstances so that you can give people the experience that the exact experience that you want to give them, and their perceived experience is real and always their own. But when you think about what you have control over in a live environment, if you're in a theater building, the architecture of theater, or if you're in a gallery, as opposed to if you're or even if you're in a VR headset, but as opposed to if you're on a Zoom call, it's like, I can't control what is going on in your house, in your background, like the temperature, the ambient music playing, the lighting, what you're supposed to look at. I was even, and I think that scales up to the highest thing and down to the lowest thing. Whereas I was critiquing some thesis presentations, and I would just clock when I got bored and when I would need to look away, because in a real room I would look away and I would look at the person who was talking to me, but I didn't have that option. So once I was done looking at the PowerPoint slide, I didn't know where to look, and so I would just look down. And I don't know if that made me listen more, or made me actually take in less, because I didn't have the option to switch back and forth between things to pay attention to. It's everything's mediated through a screen, and I can't, and like, I know how to watch a screen, and how I watch a screen is how I do my email. It's the same. It has the same commitment level.
Doesn't that sort of somehow feel related to the experience that sometimes we're having normally, just like in our consciousness? Like, we're performing like, oh, I'm paying attention, but like, really, sometimes there's like there can often be, I know for me, my mind runs like miles and miles and miles. And so in a in-person setting, I actually have to consciously perform sometimes that I'm paying attention, and I'm not always. Whereas I feel this space somehow is more representative of like, oh, I'm gonna like move this wind. Like, it's more representative of my like distracting mind, that like, oh, I'm picking up this pencil. Like, you don't see the dog at my foot right now, or like when the dog is behind me. And it's like, somehow it feels more truthful to sometimes the experience that we're working against when we're performing like our social interactions with each other.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about, this isn't exactly a direct response, but Kamal, something that you were saying was making me think so much about when I used to teach directing. I would talk about, it was really hard to get students to understand style, like to even be able to think about style, because it was like just beginning to occur to them that they might see something different than the person next to them. Right? Like, and so it's like, how do we get to subjectivity, right? And not taking what you pay attention to for granted. And that further, how I was trying to get them to think about directing was not that there was any, much to their frustration, that there is no way to direct, and there is no one way to do anything arts-based, other than to maybe think about, what do you pay attention to? And if you pay attention to that in your medium, maybe it will get others to pay attention in the same way. And so, to what you were just saying, Raja, I feel really exhausted, because I actually am exhausted by this medium, exhausted by Zoom, because I think I mostly just watch things. And here there's like the expectation you're not participating unless you're saying something. Like, you can't just sort of sit and look at how someone is behaving, which is the main thing that I mostly think about, because I'm consumed by human behavior and the nuances and, you know, idiosyncrasies and egos and vulnerabilities that drive us in our little bellies. Yeah.
That sounds so right. It also, I mean, what I think I just revealed in some ways or heard you say back is like, when I'm thinking about making, I think I would also, or thinking about how you teach as a director, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I feel that a lot of the stuff that I make for my company is so filled with things to distract people with, and in hopes that like, and hopes that like you'll see what I want you to see, but it's your choice and not my choice for you to see it. But it's like, it's there, and I'm gonna like distract you with all this other stuff, but like really I'm like, you know, pointing at the thing that I want you to see. That I felt like that was like a reversal of seeing that in that way. That it makes sense that if that's how my mind is operating, of like, I have to distract myself in order to pay attention, and that's also the way I create. Or the experience that I try to create for people.
That's interesting in terms of the kind of the idea of the frame, whether it be a proscenium or whatever, or a film frame, or, you know, there's this idea that you direct the focus, right? And obviously we've been pushing back against that in all kinds of ways, whether it be experimental film or experimental theater or site-specific work, all that kind of thing. But you know, there's always going to be another layer of complexity that is not being revealed in any moment, that's being, you know, even if you, like, you think about noises off and turning the, you know, even the backside of the proscenium forward, or even if you're in an open field doing site-specific work, there's still something beyond the horizon that's part of that reality that you're not focused on at that moment, or, and just that idea of control, around how do you control without control? How do you give agency to audience, but still give them guidance so they feel cared for, as Andrew was saying? I think that's really interesting. And when you're in this context of Zoom, there's this definitely a relationship of you're seeing you're really conscious of your own performative relationship to, like, you can see what you guys are seeing. Like, I can see my hands waving in front of me, and I'm like, oh, let me not use my hands so much, you know? It's kind of, I don't know, it's a weird kind of constraint to agency, and yet, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but I think that's interesting, the idea of what are we controlling? What do we have the power to control as makers, and what is never going to be controlled in that complexity, and that's okay. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Lars.
I just want to just quickly, the idea of attention. I think one of the things that's hard about this particular format, but that's hard in life in general for me, is like this question that you're bringing up about like, what do you pay attention to? I think is totally central, and how do you move that attention around, and play with it like clay. But with Zoom, it's like you're paying attention to, excuse me, other people with a mirror in front of you, and you know, we're just a really narcissistic culture, and it's like the culture is built on the cult of individuality. I saw in the comments, Rhea Novak, you know, asked it would be great to respond to the question, what is normal and do we want to return to it? Because some people have to jump off to other Zoom futuristic comment, you know, conversations, panels. And one of the things about normal is that, like, yeah, I think the cult of individuality is playing itself. It's at the center of capitalism, and it's playing itself out. And the screens are it's like this extreme manifestation. It's like the most glorious flower on the cult of individuality is this like screen-based communication tool. And I'm not talking about Zoom. I just mean screens in general and the way that they work, and to amplify the self. And we're jumping up and down on these like trampolines of screens. And it's a sugar high or a meth high. But it's some kind of speed. And, you know, I want to take things, I try really hard, and it's so hard, but I try very hard to stop. I try hard to forget myself for periods of time so that I can pay attention to other things.
Yeah.
And I know that it's not as simple as a binary. I mean, it's more interconnected than that, but like this definitely doesn't help me forget myself and pay attention to things.
There's you know, you can hide yourself. I always do this, actually. I can't, I'm not looking at me. I hide myself and hide myself view. Yeah, it's a very different
And
experience of Zoom, but it's weird.
Do you do that in real life too, Feather?
Well, yeah, somehow.
That's so weird.
I deflect. I think that's what we call
myself.
deflecting, right? That's what we call deflecting.
Yeah.
Let's take this moment to actually let's go there. I mean, this question is layers deep, I think. And something that struck me, I listened to a different talk yesterday, and it was like, yeah, it was an institutional talk, and it was like, we as institutions are taking, it was artistic directors, and it was like, we as institutions are taking a hard, you know, this is very hard, and we don't know what decisions to make. We're furloughing all these people. And then they started talking about the gig economy of independent artists, and like the fact that gig workers, or like the experience economy especially, is very susceptible to like, there is no protection for these people who are usually not making a lot of money anyway. Like, the institutions are doing everything that they can to survive, and the institutions need to be there. Like, we as artists need the institutions, and the institutions need us. But it also got me thinking, like, if that's normal, like, is there a way, and I know that everyone's thinking about this. Kamal, I know that, I mean, part of the whole guild is dedicated to systemic change, and like collaborative systemic change in lots of different ways, not obviously not just the arts, but I wonder if, I mean, it's big. It's like the earth is like, hey, humans, like, y'all are messing it up. Like, the earth knows what it's doing, and we're so egocentric. And I see this rush back, or this rush to get online, this rush to like, wait, we have to, but what are we gonna do? We have to keep going with our entertainment. And I do make a distinction between entertainment and like, and in my head, so, like, I know whether I'm trying to go for entertainment or for the arts. And I do think that they can be combined as well. But I wonder if it, like, do we need to rush back into this? And isn't there, is it the best system that we have? And I want to broaden that, like, it comes from an artistic place, but it also comes from like a systemic change in general in the United States, especially, of just like, is this the best we got? I'm frightened by the lust to return to normal, whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That we had a gathering of the members, you know, first week of quarantine, and the Great Reset and let's get back to normal was kind of trending on social media, and it was like the members were like, we've got to do something to kind of counter that narrative, because what normal got us here in the first place. And so we launched a 10-week sprint of Futurist Writers Rooms online with the public. We've had about 150 people join to co-create visions of futures that go, we've been doing 10 years forward, 10 years back every week, until like we get to 100 years forward and 100 years back. And we do a speculative history as well as a speculative future. The history, because it puts us in the present tense of the past and why they made the decisions they made, and what were their blind spots, what were the imperatives. And it's just, you know, hindsight is 2020. It just gives such clarity. Like, for example, they talked about in the 70s how they passed all these laws to around food systems in the US that preferenced calorie dense, nutrient deficient foods. And now we have this, you know, huge, you know, crisis of food in this country, especially that's leading to all kinds of diseases and obesity and things. And they talked about who were those people that made that decision in the 70s. They were children of the Depression, and they were people that were part of the largest population boom in US history. So they were operating out of trauma, right? They were responding to their trauma and overcorrecting. I mean, obviously there's the big, you know, capitalistic greed part of that for sure. But, you know, at the fundamental, what is greed? Greed comes out of fear, right? Fear of not having. And so when you think about the design principle of how do we not react only to our trauma from this pandemic moment, and be informed by our trauma in this moment of what we don't want to go back to, but also be thoughtful about how we are seeking, you know, asking the right questions around where we're going. It's been just such a rich experience to have. I think now we've had 6 sessions, and the ideas about what we look like in 2080 are just blowing my mind, and they're much better than I could come up with myself. So there's something about that co-creation moment that I think is critical. But a lot of it goes back to, I mean, a lot of the things we're hearing are ideas like, can we make space and slow down is actually a big theme. Make space for nature, make space for biodiversity, make space for ourselves to not just rush back into this kind of hypomanic version of work and life post-COVID.
Yeah, how does that happen?
That's the next step, right? How do you get to that?
I feel like it's so hard to even have the conversation. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't want to, I because people have to jump off to other Zoom calls. I would love to hear from the other panelists. I definitely have some more, I just did 6 weeks of this, so I have a lot of detail, but I would, and we're going to be writing articles about it that are coming out on Medium, but just the fact that that is what we've seen most often is this idea of wellness on a holistic, very complex level. And this idea of slowing down, making space, being in real space was interesting. Like one of the ideas from yesterday's call was, what if there was a travel by foot movement that comes out of this moment, so that people, like if you're going on vacation, you have to walk there. Where does that mean you get to something that's not that far from your home and get closer to your native species, and to, really creating a relationship of stewardship with your own actual ground that you live and use and use the resources of. I mean, it kind of was an explosion of ideas. So I can't go through all of them, and hopefully this series will illuminate. But what I can say about it is this power. A lot of people have come to us and said, nobody asks me to imagine like this. Nobody has asked me to stretch my imagination like this. And even people particularly that are coming from the non-art spaces are like, it's a muscle that has gone atrophied. And I'm so thankful that I'm now having a space where I can really build that muscle again. Because people, if they're in a state of fear, they're retracting to what they know because we're afraid of the unknown. And when you catalyze that imagination, they have to get brave enough to see beyond their own fears into that unknown. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you.
I feel like Andrew, your anxiety, I feel like would an answer be about design, like how do you design spaces and interactions that alleviate the things, like some of the things that we were talking about? Like is it about planning?
It's about making the time for planning, I think. Or like at least having the conversation of just like, I just feel a rush, even from a lot of my peers in the arts. Like, when are we gonna get back? We gotta get back. We gotta go. Like, the people, like I need to keep creating, and so I'm gonna pivot to like online performance. I'm gonna pivot to like this other thing. Whereas like the drive, like I've never wanted to make an online performance, and I still don't. But I'm like, oh, is that what I'm going to have to do now? Because it's the only option available to me. And before I even think about those things, I want to have the conversation of like, was this the best that we could imagine before? Because now we're stopped, and at least I just want to acknowledge that it's not the best that we thought that we could do, and to have the conversation.
In like movies when people jump out of trains and then they like roll on the ground and then like get up and dust themselves off. I think we're in the like rolling part and like the hitting rocks and shit. Like we're like slowing down, and I don't think we've even gotten up and like dusted ourselves off yet. And this would have, but actually a question I had for the group is about, so this is like a trajectory disruption. And yeah, I mean, yes, I think human beings could imagine a much better way of organizing ourselves than we are currently doing on this planet. No question, in so many ways that we can't even touch on. But the thing that's interesting to me about this moment is like, outside of like the horrific things that are happening to so many people, and like the really basic level, like just like the kind of foundational issue we got with the economic pressures on artists in particular, but economic pressures on like 85% of the populace, which is not very in particular. It's very general, but that like people are playing ping pong with their lives, and then like it's you have to react that fast just in order to like take care of basic necessities for such a majority of people. And that's what I feel like. That's why I feel like we're still rolling and continuing to play ping pong as we roll, and we're like we have like the, it's like the bends or the shakes and withdrawal from a drug or something like that. Like we have a metabolic rhythm of the society that we were in. And so foundationally, so much of that is like economic pressure. But outside of that economic pressure, I do wonder, and I don't know if you can say outside of that, but I'll pretend like you can for a second. A question I kind of have for everybody is, have you ever interrupted your own trajectory? And like, what does it take to interrupt your trajectory, and why and how? And because there seems to be like massive benefits from a dramatic interruption of trajectory. Certainly, I don't recommend this particular pill for the society to swallow, but interrupting the trajectory seems essential. And I know that climate issues are very, very central to my practice and things that I read and think about. And that whole conversation is about how do we interrupt the trajectory? How do we get more people to jump off the train? And it's like impossible. Like climate scientists are like, why doesn't, it's like the information's there. Everybody knows, like everybody knows what's happening. We just have to change. We have to do some basic things to get this conversation started, or to get like alleviation started. And it's nigh impossible to get people to change their behavior.
My only relationship to like interrupting my trajectory that is like in like romantic relationships. Right? It sounds like you're in this romantic relationship, yeah. Like all the signs are there, this is like really terrible, and you're like, but I'm in it, it's like it's gonna be better, I'm gonna figure it out. And my only experience in that I've like just cut people off. I'm just like, this relationship is over, we're done, please don't call me, please don't come back. And it's like, not until you jump off the train of that you're like, oh wow, that was great. And then you realize how to get on, and then you get on another train. With work, in my experience, I started working at I don't know, like in the 7th grade, and I've never not worked a day of my life since then, until I was forced out of work, on March 15th. And it was immediately scary for somebody. One is like, I think I realized just how dependent I've become on my artistic practice and on work. It's like the stages of why are so intense. It's like I had to like get away from where I was growing up. I had to survive, and then I found dancing and I found art, and it's become this thing that's like, if I'm not doing that, the other result is like, I don't know, I'm gonna go to jail, or I'll like become a drug addict, or whatever like my life was before the age of 13. And so there was like always this fear that drove me forward in order to like get away from how I grew up, and it's been fine. I've been able to motor through, and it's only, and this disruption is like, oh fuck, this is awful. Like now, what have you become dependent on? And often I've thought, like as someone who like works as a choreographer, I'm also like, I've always like, I feel tertiary. It's like, well, I only have work unless there's like a director that has work, that has like a writer who has work, who like has a theater who has work. So even though I felt like, oh yeah, I'm like moving, I'm like getting through things, I'm like, I have a job, I still feel this like dependency on like something else or someone else who's dependent on something or someone else. And there's something oddly comforting but also scary in terms of like, oh, well, we're all in the same place now. Like, I don't feel like a victim. I'm like, well, we're all sort of dealing with this. But there is still that fear of like, well, if it goes back, which is like something I will also say I don't really believe in. I don't believe there's like a going back, but just for the sake of moving forward in this moment, like if we go back, well, how will I deal with that dependency on like a director and a writer, a director, writer, theater? So there's that, and then I I don't know. I keep trying to avoid talking about going back because I don't think that that's possible. And then it makes me think about how again, I start to think about how much I've learned from being an artist, whereas like the unknown is actually quite exciting for me. I'm like, oh wait, this is what I've been training for. I've been training and I've been studying and creating for this moment that's like, oh, what's ahead of you is completely unknown. And there's like a great deal of emotional and financial and social stress that comes with that. It's like, well, you might not be able to live where you live. You might not be able to eat at some point, but you're also gonna figure that out. And that's why you've been doing this. Like this is the chance for us to like flex our creative muscles, to be like, what can we do? And what do we need to do? What are we trying to communicate? What do we want for ourselves, for our communities, for our families? And we are those beings that can figure that out. And yeah, I have no desire to go back to anything, but a great desire to like be the builder of the path that's in front of me.
I can say that I have had, like, you know, I had a show up at the Henry Street Settlement during 9/11. I was in the building on 9/11. I was taking a break from Stomp so I could have, you know, spend a few months having my show. And so I was temping during the day to like make the money, the ends meet, because I wasn't getting my Stomp salary in that hiatus. And, you know, it changed my life fundamentally. I was running away from the buildings going, oh my God, I almost died today and I haven't been a mother. And a month later, my husband and I got pregnant with my son, who's now about to turn 18. And he was one of those 9/11 babies. So like, talk about disruption and change. Like I had a 5-show contract with Fractured Atlas, which was a producing company at the time and was my producer. And that, you know, it was at this moment, like, in fact, Fractured Atlas, because of that moment, decided not to be a theatrical producer and become a artist services organization and go the direction they ended in terms of supporting artists with their businesses. But it was, so I've had a number of apocalyptic moments in my life. My youngest brother, also a theater maker, NYU, ETW, he had bipolar and took his life in 2012. And that was an apocalyptic moment. And I think about like the idea of apocalypse and, you know, the feeling of this is the end. And I've, you know, I've had that thing where you had to pick yourself up and you know, and go to that next. And it is always been, in my experience, something that definitely changes the trajectory. But there has been life and richness on the other side of that. And I'm really trying to understand, you know, what is the key to that resilience that allows us to do better. Now, I'm not a progressionist narrative person. I'm not somebody that's like, oh, we're always advancing, because, you know, clearly when I think about certain aspects of our human history, you know, there's arguments that we were healthier physically and more mentally well as hunter-gatherers than we ever have been as agregarial or industrialized people. So I'm not somebody that's just like progress, but there is something about the poetry of a life lived, of coming out of those crises, and how, especially as an artist, how it informs your work, about what you were talking about, Andrew, at the beginning, human beings telling stories of the human beings that make meaning, and make a life lived that is fulfilling.
Yeah, I'm really moved by everything that you just said, Kamal, and I feel like on the kind of question of progress, like progression narratives, and to your original question to this period, Lars, of like trajectories being interrupted, I don't personally experience myself on any trajectories, because I'm not sure I ever think about goals in quite that way. Like, actually, I think about what I'm doing with a particular project, and certainly in the like hashtag goals camp, there is a path that has like a million different permutations that I can see a bunch of for Lempicka to go to Broadway, which is a show that Raj and I are making. And I do, in terms of the question of normal and getting back to it, like I want everyone who works at the Hudson Scenic Shop, which I was on the phone with Mozilla today, and I want them to all get back to work. I want the members of my union and Raj's union, the stage directors and choreographers. I want people. I really believe in artists as widget makers as much as a factory in Reading, Pennsylvania. And I would be as sad for a factory, as many of them are, to be out of work as I feel for so many artists. And so there's a lot of aspects of quote unquote normal that I want to see. And so I'm thinking a lot separately about, in terms of like systemic change, about the potential actually for the resumption of individual artist funding, which I didn't grow up knowing at all, really, because I grew up in the, or came of age professionally post the NEA4 and the abolition by the culture wars of individual artist funding in this country. But I hear it being talked about a lot. I was on a call yesterday with the co-chair of the Arts Caucus in the House, and she said many of the things that we were talking about at the beginning, and that I thought, Lars, you beautifully said it, like this image of rolling down a hill. Like, she was like, we're just figuring out still how to stem the holes in the dam, much less be able to think about something that was the WPA or the Federal Theater Project or the Federal Writers Project, and the scope of vision that came out of that, which I feel actually very hopeful towards there being ways to sort of get, try to get boutique a little bit more, by which I mean, like, how does this particular project want to live? How does this particular artist want to breathe? How does this thing get made, and not taking as many things for granted? So that feels like a type of normal that I don't feel interested in returning to. Though I do want to see the workforce. I do want to see people. Yeah, I want to see that resume.
Andrew, answer your own question.
Oh, yeah.
Actually,
Did you hear that? That was amazing and brilliant. The thing that I keep thinking about is like, I'm an artist. I hustle. I try to hustle, and like everything that I do is like I also employ people, right? But I'm not gonna be able to employ people unless like I hustle and like write some grants and like get people to notice me. And I wonder about the thing specifically I wonder about is like, how does change happen, and does it come from critical mass? And the voices that are already marginalized, do they get further marginalized? Like someone said in the comments, like there are people who weren't ever on the train to begin with. They were like always in the rocks. And it's like, as I try to re-hustle to, like, because my life doesn't have a trajectory, like I don't, it's just always project to project, and it's never a steady stream. And like, as I start to like ramp up and try to get myself back going, like how do I not participate in like further oppressing already marginalized voices, and or how do I actively create community that we're all to looking out for each other, or because my life up until now has been very concerned with myself and like, how do I get to the next thing? But like, I just keep thinking about like, how do we get to the next thing? And like, what does it look like? Does the system work like that? How do I even as an individual make work that like, that creates opportunity? Or like, if I'm a gatekeeper, how do I don't know. It's for me, it's way more questions than answers. And I don't like the reward system that I see in normal times, because I see it as like a series of things that you have to break through or into. And and it's not an equal playing field. Sorry. Should we, Lars, I know you have to go in 12 minutes. And so I'm not, what if I was muted that whole time and people were just like,
That would be so good. That would be so good. I would love that. We're like, yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, great, Andrew. Another rant. I wonder if anyone has any response to that. More than welcome, because
I do have a response.
Yeah.
And I had a friend recently that emailed and was like, we're gonna do this thing, like we're gonna start a company and then we're gonna go out and like babysit kids for people who need their kids babysat. And I was like, okay, all right, like sign me up, I'm so happy to help. And then I was like, I had this weird thing where I was like, why? I was like, there are so many communities always that need help. Like, I want to do this with you, but I also just feel bad because like, why, a month ago, why 2 months ago, weren't we like thinking about how to help community, like, I mean, we were in different ways, but perhaps not with the same amount of like energy. I was like, I really want to challenge myself to try to think about how to be participating in these communities that I'm both a part of and not a part of, that are marginalized or disparaged, and not think like, oh, now that I have this time and I'm not doing anything, I should just like go and help people who need help. Like, that feels really gross. And also so like still do it, and that feels gross, but how do I bring that forward into my life if I go back or forward, in whatever way. So I think about that in some ways. That's in response, like how by going back, like, was it ever okay before to not pay attention to, I'm just using this to paraphrase, to pay attention to a specific community or a specific difference in need, desire, class, disparaged, marginalization, and why, and it's so hypothetical. It's like, how could I have been thinking about that before? I'm happy to be thinking about it now. Will I take that forward if I'm able to get back to where I was or get back into my groove and hustle? Will I take that information forward? How do I take that information forward? How do I not let an interruption of a trajectory, acknowledged or not acknowledged? What does that say about me? What is that reflection? What does that mirror? Was that articulated at all? Okay.
No, I think it is to this.
I'm like, yeah, no, interesting.
I mean, I think you're speaking to the idea, I think some of what, Andrew, you sent ahead of time of this panel, of the idea of reaction and response, right? And one of the big insights around, like I was at an event in the fall where good.com presented around kind of a big analysis they did of who cares, who gives a shit, basically. And the way that, at least in the United States, it broke down into pretty even quarters of our population that gives a shit. Like, there was the apathetics, who were just like usually young people that were, comfortable, and they really, might be like, oh yeah, that really sucks that this thing happened, but they, were just more interested in, their own particular lives and comfort. You had the kind of a quarter of people that were just like, hey, lift yourself up by your bootstraps. This is, a kind of a rugged individualistic approach to, we all have to survive. If everybody does that, we'll be fine. And then another was the strivers, who kind of made it out of a community of poverty or a marginalized community, and are like holding on by their fingernails to maintain whatever level of mobility that they've gotten, whether it be economically or social power or whatever it is. And then you had the do-gooders, which was about 25%, and they are fragmented into 1,000 different issues that they're all trying to, fight to like, okay, we got to, we've got climate change, we've got refugees, we've got, in the prison industrial complex, we've got, there's just so many things going on by that quarter that the effectiveness of that group is quite limited compared to, for example, we're working with the Rockefeller Foundation on the future of food systems work, and they, there's like a $2 million prize from Rockefeller to work on the future of food systems globally. And that's compared with 8.8 billion per year that the fast food sugar industry is spending, right? So part of the ineptness that I think you're feeling is the reality of, one, you are in and of yourself, you are somebody who has manifested, you're coming from what is traditionally underrepresented in the kind of arts on Broadway or all these other places. And you are the person that is what people 20, 30, 40 years ago were working to manifest, right? You are a dream realized, right, in and of yourself. So there's work for you to do as that person that has to bring your voice and be authentic to that. And that's a full-time job, right? So I think a little bit of what we're feeling here is the fatigue of a lack of coordination and a lack of real, the right kind of coordination of resources, energy, so that we can actually move the needle on some of these things. Because it does feel like, what is my little drop gonna do in this big ocean of things that we have going on? And that's part of the reason why I'm working with people that are trying to build systems that can better utilize that energy that you have with your passion aligned, so that the work you're doing as an authentic artist and with your voice is also moving the needle on all these other issues.
Pretty good. Anybody else?
No, I'm just thinking about, obviously I'm thinking about government policy, and like, we live in a very uncompassionate state. And so, as state by state, I don't mean New York, obviously, I mean sort of the American state. And so there's an intense reliance upon individual motivation to, create forms of welfare for ourselves and maybe much more so for our neighbors. And I think it ultimately, I don't believe that conservative people don't do that. I'm saying this as a very progressive person. I think there's a huge amount of that neighborliness in conservative communities. It's just obviously the problems of who your neighbor is. That is ferocious and scary when I think about more conservative communities. But I think fundamentally there's like an anxiety that is produced because we live in such a cruel nation. Which is not helpful. But I think for me, that I guess I'm mostly sitting back. I'm saying something because I can feel that's call. It would be good since we're on Zoom and you have to say things out loud on Zoom. But I think mostly it feels very practical to me in terms of, if there was a more compassionate state, there would be, I think, less anxiety, maybe on your part, Andrew, of what is called for in terms of addressing these gross disparities, because our state is so cruel.
Yeah. Lars, I know you got to go in 3 minutes to homeschool or whatever, wherever it is you're going. Sorry, I don't know what you're doing. Do you have any parting thoughts? Do you have any like putting thought into practice type thoughts? Or anything. Sorry, I don't mean
practice
spot like that.
I mean, yeah.
Did you freeze? What happened?
No, I'm just slowing down, man.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's off-putting, I know, but I'm just trying to react with a moment. I mean, I think Yeah, taking time is the thought into practice thing that I'm trying to do actively, because it's the ping pong is so addictive. The different kinds of dopamine drivers, the different kinds of like reaction and feedback and reaction and feedback. And slowing down is a luxury because of the cruel state that Rachel's talking about. And like, I'm a big believer in art for art's sake, but I don't think, you know, that's not the kind of art that I tend to make. And I tend to make art that has to do with the metaphysical condition of living in a cruel state, at a cruel time in history that's no more or less cruel than another time. It just depends on like which body you happen to be on the planet. But and reflecting on that in my work is important to me as an act of, just as purely as an act of thought, again, for its own sake. And it's like a little lighthouse trying to get, you know, on a rocky shore to somebody who's stuck in the fog in a boat. And I'm like simultaneously a little boat on the ocean, and I'm a little lighthouse trying to like make work that broadcasts something back to myself. And there's other people in boats it's kind of nearby, and sometimes in my boat. And I see there's a lot of other people who make different kinds of lighthouses too, that are, you know, guide me by. I thought about giving up being an artist. I mentioned this to you, Andrew, but I tried really hard for several months to think about what it would be in terms of trajectory interruption, what it would mean to stop the thing that I thought I was, and just to meditate on that, mostly because I felt like, as I mentioned before, like I just felt like climate is something that I perhaps should be spending 100% of my energy on, that's not attributed to like my family. And maybe there's a way I could have a bigger, I guess I'd call it a political impact. Maybe there's some other way I could amplify what I believe to be true about climate, and move the needle, which I guess is like an activist position. And then I just didn't think that part of it was that I just didn't think that was totally me. I think every solution I came up with was an artistic solution. So I thought I would suck at, I just don't think I'd be good at it, at an alternative. But yeah, I think it's strange. One of the things in terms of normalness in our country is that I think the battle line is drawn in our country such that artists have to defend to the rest of the country that art is a valuable thing. Mm-hmm. And so much energy goes into just that conversation. And rather than taking for granted or as true that art is a valuable thing, for example, like even in the educational sphere, art for kids, it's like that's a war that's fought all over the country in public schools, in the budgets every year. And yeah, as a citizen, and an artist, it would be wouldn't it be just so lovely to not be living in a paradigm in which like that was in question, like whether arts is a valuable thing for a kid to have, let alone, you know. So I don't know how to, you know, it's like I want to I personally want to be an activist. I wish I didn't feel like I had to be an activist quite so much with my work. And I feel like that's something that I believe in, and I need the artistic experience. There's parts of the work that's unclassifiable and metaphysical, and then part of it for me has to be political, because I have to be wrestling with the newsfeed. And I just, and that's exhausting. And I just feel like I feel like I'm being pinned by something, and I'm just like pushing back against the thing that's pinning me. And I don't mean that in a kind of like a nihilistic French, like modern 1950s, you know, existential way. I feel like much more materially, not by like the problem of existence. I'm not being pinned by the problem of existence. I feel like myself and my colleagues and my friends are being pinned by like material concerns. That gets to the, you know, that speaks to like what Rachel was talking about in terms of the cruel state, which is a lot more than this government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Concur. Yes, I want to be clear. I'm definitely not talking about just the Trump administration.
Thanks, Lars.
Yeah, y'all. Good luck out there, everybody. Take care. I'm gonna go homeschool my 7-year-old.
Have fun.
Thanks, y'all. You
Lars,
too.
it was so lovely hearing from you today.
Vice versa.
Bye, Lars. Thank you.
Bye. Peace.
So we're getting to the end of our time. If there's any questions for anybody who's still out there, any direct questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to type them in the chat or in the Q&A. And I know that there's some already there. And for, well, let's see what's already here. Yeah, I think Lars just spoke to, you know, this feeling like, how do we get people to care about these mediums? Or, so one of the things that I keep coming back to is Netflix is really good at what Netflix is good at, and theater is not good at the same thing that Netflix is good at. And I wonder how. I wonder if this distinction is made, and I wonder, will there be a? And what I am hopeful for is that there will be a I heard somebody say yesterday, like, I long for the moment that the lights go, like the moment between when the lights go down and the lights come back up. And I feel like a 6-year-old, like waiting for the show to start. Like that made me emotional for like the return to art, the return to someone taking care of my experience. Right. I am hopeful about that. I just don't know when it's going to happen, but I do feel like there might be a grand resurgence to go back to whatever that normal was, and I guess I do look forward to that. Any questions from anyone who's watching?
Just to your point, the idea of screen fatigue leading to liveness, like there was this moment in the 2000s where I kind of observed this. There was a palpable fear that everyone would be stuck in their homes, at their home theaters, on their screens, and nobody would ever leave to go to the theater again, and they wouldn't ever go. Like it was going to become this, like, you know, isolationist kind of community, and especially with the, you know, the hipsters, there was this like complete backlash against digital into analog, and coffee shops exploding, physical comic book stores exploded with clientele. I mean, you know, it was a kind of a backlash to too many screens, right? Not that the screens didn't continue to rise as well, but there was also this, I want to get out of Second Life and I want to go sit at a coffee shop. Or maybe be in Second Life while at a coffee shop talking to someone. But I wonder if we're going to see that happen, where it actually could be not a return necessarily, but a kind of like, oh, I'm you know, Zoom. I have Zoom Lash, and I want to go out and be in community, and like where, you know, those community-based events and performances and whatever become what people are hungry for. And maybe changing the relationship to people understanding that value intrinsically more so than we've invested in, as Lars was saying.
Yeah, I find myself thinking a lot about a Gardzinica performance, which was this Polish company that involved a lot of really ancient Polish throat singing. And it was rich. I mean, it was ritual, definitely, in its most ancient form, and really wanting to go back to reading about the experiments that Grotowski was doing towards the end of his life in terms of bringing people off into the woods and that kind of fellowship. And I feel, and I also love sitting in a theater when the lights go down, or when they stay on and someone starts looking at me. So yeah, I feel both things y'all are talking about.
Are you looking at the questions, Andrew?
Yeah. I think a lot of these are some of what we covered. How do we as artists help people understand and participate in the arts so they benefit as we participating artists do? And another one is I wonder if one way to approach the conversation about the rush to return to normal is to think about additional ways to hear from individuals and communities for whom normal never really worked well in the first place. Certain disability communities, discussions with people who are living more accessible lives now than the rest of society has forced to change in radical ways.
Just a quick note on that. We have a pandemic response task force, and one of the working groups is digital gatherings. And Lily Baldwin, who some of you guys may know, is a dancer, filmmaker, is in that group and has got, somebody who has had a very visceral, physical dance practice for many, many years, had some health issues that have changed her ability to participate in the world in that way. And she is part of the otherly abled community that has had to deal with isolationism. And so she's been bringing some incredible insights into that group, talking about the learnings that she's had within a community that's been isolated from being in real space for various reasons, and been begging for people to use kind of accommodate, ways in which we can create space for that. And so it's really kind of a flip of what I think is really interesting is a lot of times we position marginalized communities as deficit-based identities instead of the asset-based identities that come from that perspective. And in this case, the insights that are coming from communities that have the disability community are actually what the able-bodied community desperately needs. So it's interesting to see, hopefully, that being one aspect of this, of the reversal of that deficit-based, stigmatized thing, and us understanding universal design practices where when you design for the margins, you design better for everyone.
Thank you for that. So our time is almost done. Maybe we can just conclude by anything that you're doing in your own lives, like thought into practice. Any tips you have for any of the people watching? Just like how are you making things better for yourself in this time?
I'm doing a lot of I'm doing a lot of like prep work on different documents and taking the time to, in particular, thinking about television and film projects this is so basic and boring, but like doing a ton of image research for projects that I've had in my head. And it's always the reminder of like, I could sit and begin to tell you about this television show that I think should be in existence, because it's an unbelievable story of like both the civil rights era that's not been talked about, and such a story of government victory and like these totally kind of pirate activists who made this massive change. And it's wonky and beautiful, but then I begin to talk about how it looks, and I find myself going, well, there's a thing that I saw at some point in my life. So I've just been doing all this image research on things that I want to see someday, and setting it down in a way that I can talk to people about it. And I've also been running, listening to podcasts.
And wearing a mask.
And wearing a mask, absolutely. So those have all been good for me.
Cool.
Pointing to Raja.
Yeah, I really don't know what to say. These questions are so good, Andrew. Well, I just mean good in that I'm like, wow, these are so unanswerable, particularly for me.
Exactly the kind of questions you want for a panel. This is why I'm
Yeah,
not a
I'm like,
moderator.
wow, how do I answer that? How am I making things better for myself? Oh, yikes. I don't know if I am. I don't know if I am making things better for myself. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. I found some new ways to find structure, which I understand more. I've always known that structure is important to me. It's more clear now that structure is incredibly important to me, and so I am finding ways to find structure and what I need and what's important to me about what I do as an artist. Like I'm distilling what it actually is that's important to me. And this is actually similar to something that Rachel said earlier, whereas I think in some parts of my life there is a very clear trajectory, like talking about being a survivalist, like coming from what I've come from and being like, my trajectory is like to never go back to that. There's like, as an artist, however, I'm like, I also just don't, what's interesting is like, I don't really, some of these projects are falling away and I really don't care. What I really care about is like the people that I get to work with and that we're like able to like be creative together. And so the time that I've like structured in my life is like, I have these phone calls or meetings or just like time where I talk to people and we're just like, you know, we're like making speculative theater. We're like, this project will never happen, but just let's just talk through it. You know, just like, what are our dreams? And I'm like, oh, that actually fulfills me in the same way that like going to a studio has fulfilled, where there are goals and needs. And I'm like, that's really important to me, is like, you know, flexing my brain and thinking and doing research and watching TV shows like Instant Hotel as like an anthropological study on the way that people deal with people. Like, that is fascinating to me, and it always has been. Student, you know, like I'm always like watching TV, like, wow, this is how people interact with each other, and I can still do that now, and I can do that with people, and that's like utterly fascinating. And I guess it would be false to say like, I hope that at some point that like can still be a job that I have in the world. I definitely want that. I want to create and make things. But right now, finding that structure to be in that space and to know that that can't be taken away is super thrilling.
Yeah, no, this has been a crazy time because I've been traveling pretty much at least twice a month for the last 8 years straight. And I have 3 kids and I'm a single mom. So it's been a challenge. And I mean, I've had this longing to have time with my kids forever, you know, just to like, and it's kind of this surreal thing because since the quarantine started, I have all my kids and I don't have to get on a plane, but I'm Zooming 12 hours a day. Like it's, and I'm like, they're just there. I mean, I want to like, you know, so we, you know, the first month was just whirlwind, like, you know, 70-hour weeks, just trying to recalibrate everything and trying to respond in a responsible way, all this stuff. But then we took a weathering prevention break last week where we just took, you know, the 2 days in the weekend and then 2 days extra just to do absolutely nothing. We were not allowed to touch the computer so that we could basically, like, if COVID does come to any one of us on my team, we are gonna be, you know, immune deficient because we've been working like crazy. And so we decided to do this weathering prevention. And then since we've done that, we've been able to slow down and it's been delightful. I've been having that time with my kids that I've dreamed of for 8 years.
Oh man, so great. And I'm not gonna take any more of that very valuable time. Just a couple of things that you know, someone in the RIA said, heard this time referred to not as the upcoming Great Depression, but the Great Compassion. And yeah, that's slowing down. how we take care of ourselves and others can help us move forward and not go back to how things were. That's from Maria, and then that from Grow Yoga. I think that's all the time we have. But you know, our trajectories will live on. And this will be archived somewhere. I think a link will be sent out I think it already has been sent out. You can look in the chat. But I think that it will also be available on the BAI website. And the document is also just available for people to check out and see what some folks have been reading. Add to, comment as you like. Anything else that anyone wants to say?
Thank you, Andrew. You've been amazing.
Yeah.
This hasn't even, just for everybody out there in the broadcast or in the recording, this wasn't even the tip of the iceberg of the amount of thinking that Andrew's been doing around this. It's quite impressive, and I hope you write a book.
Agreed. I second that.
Wow.
Third.
All
It's
right.
been such a pleasure talking with you all.
Yeah, what a conversation. What a group of minds. I hope that we get to do this again at some point. And yeah, I'm thinking about a lot of stuff, so I hope it wasn't too jumbled and mashed up. But there is I think it's super important to have conversations, open conversations. So thank you to BAI and Brown and Sophia and Kira and Greg and Sean and everybody who helped us out, set this up. Thanks, and we're around. Email me, call me, let's talk. All right, thanks y'all.
Take care. Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Good to see you, Kamal. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Raja.
Yes.
Andrew, I mean, dude, get a new color. Seriously. It's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see everybody. We'll hug in person soon.
Yes.
I'm not touching anybody. I'm kidding. I would love to hug you. Okay, bye.
Just us now. Bye.
Yay. Should we do a dance? Are everybody still here?
Oh, we didn't get to talk about your Skittles thing, huh?
No one's interested in me.
I'm so interested.
Really,
We're just gonna hang out here and talk for longer about it.
Get some of that. I could do a sick ass commercial right here in this room for a very nice check.
Yeah. Someone
Hey,
was
Skittles, if you're out there listening.
Yeah. The next big idea. Raja's apartment.
I feel like there should be competitions. Like, I would love to do a competition right now.
Or you mean just like in general on Zoom calls?
Yeah, just like some kind of a competition. I don't know. I was like,
we have a cook-off, or like bobbing for apples.
Yeah, like I feel like I need, like, although I feel like I'm being generally tested as like a human being.
Yeah.
I want to put my brain to like a test. Like I feel like that's what happens when I'm in rooms where they're like, okay, Raja. Oh, it's funny that Rachel left, because Rachel, working with Rachel, she'll be like, okay, I'll be back. You got to finish this song. You got to finish the song. I need 4 of those people over there. I need 9 of those people over there. And that person's got a quick change, and you've got to like get them. You got to get them, moving. And it's got to look good. And you've got 45 minutes to figure that out before the break.
You thrive on competition.
I thrive on competition.
Yeah.
And the competition is with myself. I don't need to be better than anyone. But I do like the I can do this, and I can problem solve. Maybe we shouldn't call it competition. I like critical thinking and problem solving.
Mm.
And now,
there's motivation from other people.
Yeah, like, do you think I could go to a hospital and I'm like, look, like, actually, there might be some like choreographic information that might be useful for the flow of this place. That like, I know we're not thinking about that, but like maybe actually I can help choreographically, just talk about how this room flows, and like maybe that could like just give you a small bit of impact that might have like a small thing that might have a good impact, just a small change to have a larger impact.
I mean, I think that the siloing of industries has always been unhelpful for me to think about. Like I have thoughts about other things that could come in handy.
Well, I don't know. I feel like that's always exciting when like if you're like a person who's like an artist and you're brought to like a corporate field and they're like, like we have the artist Andrew Schneider who's gonna come and talk to this group of bros at this tech company just about like, trust falls. And like you really teach them something, about like talking in the dark to each other or something, and they learn lessons that they wouldn't have otherwise learned.
I mean, I feel like that's what I'm trying to do with the work that I make, is just like,
well, that's why I said that.
I would love it if bros came to the show and were like, I really learned something about myself. I mean, that's not my target audience, and that's what I think about is like, who is this for? That's the one question we didn't get to, is who is this for?
Right. But maybe, the thing with targeted audiences, or do you think that we're all targeting the audiences that we should be targeting? Like you maybe you should target bro. Those aren't your target audiences, but they would see you differently than they would see me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, but also we could also be in a different category. We could also be in the same category. They would also see us differently than they would see like the HR department that they currently have,
Yeah, I mean, I once thought I was doing like super experimental off the wall stuff, and I got invited to like somewhere like upstate New York, and I was like, I almost canceled the show because they had a town hall meeting in the space that like in the room that then like the after town hall meeting was like my show.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, like there were like kids there were old people there. I was like, they are gonna hate this. And it was one of the best audiences I've ever had. And it's changed me totally. I was like, oh, I'm not just talking to the people who already agree with me. I'm like, they were like, I've never seen anything like that. That was so interesting. I never thought about that. And I was like, oh, why would I want to talk to the people who I already know are going to enjoy this? Like, how do I use the?
Well, I mean, I think that's the question for now. I mean, I've been taking this great pause seriously. I've just been like, where I'm supposed to go or what I'm supposed to do or how I'm supposed to participate will reveal itself to me. Like there is a place for what I do and how I do it. And I just feel like that will show up like as a necessity. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel in some ways like, I mean, like you, I have to employ people, right? So like, that's where the necessity is right now. I'm like, how do I get the people who work for me money? Like, we have money that's like tied up in grants. And I'm like, I need to figure out how to get that money to those people. That's where I'm most valuable right now, because like it's not my income. It's like tied up in some grant that I've already been awarded, and I have a company of 18 designers and collaborators who don't have work and who the unemployment system doesn't work for. And I'm like, that is my essential work. And once that happens, my essential work will be like solving some problems because I have a creative brain that can do that, and that will become necessary at some point.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes deep for me also because whatever engagement I see out there right now, I'm like, oh, why are these people making all this work to put online? And I'm like, oh, it's because the funders like they're like, engage with your audience. Like we still exist.
Right.
Like we have to, the funders are saying like, you need to still engage. And so there's a mandate that trickles down to like, well, the artists have to make work to do stuff. And like, yeah, there's, it's like you, Raja, are now like, even if you don't want to make the thing that your grant said that you were going to make, like, do you feel like you are making out of necessity, or you're making out of, it's weird because like the drive to be an artist sometimes comes from like, oh, I have things to say, but then sometimes it's like essential work because you can pay people.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm in that place where I've always been the person to push back, right? I've always been, unfortunately, that asshole artist that's like, I'm not going to do the thing that everyone else is doing because the importance for me is to like be the art that I want to see. And so if I'm seeing a bunch of everyone doing the same thing, I'm just not interested in doing that. But like a part of my thing right now is like everything just like looks, all this like art out here just like looks the same. Everyone's like Zoom performance, and I'm sorry if there's anyone out there doing that. I'm just like, there's no, like, I actually have Netflix for that. I have Netflix for that. I'm sorry, I don't want to watch your Zoom performance. Sorry, I love you, I don't want to watch it. You know, but also, you know, I have like a grant right now, and I was supposed to have a residency in June, and they're like, look, we'll give you this money, but like we need, like you're saying, like we need to show something. So like, do you want to do like a Zoom chit chat? I'm like, no, I don't want to do a fucking Zoom chit chat. Like this is the last thing I want to do. But then they're like, okay, well then you figure it out. You tell us what you want to do, but we need some kind of, and then that's where I get excited. I'm like, oh, so now it's in my hands to design an experience that allows me the things that I want, which is like, okay, so you're going to give me the money, right? You're going to send the money. Great. And then I get to give it to my collaborators. We get to work on the shit we want to work on. And then we get to design how we want to engage with the people. And we're not falling into the model that's like the easy model that's like, okay, well, we'll just do like a quick like Zoom performance, you know, like that's the easy thing. That's like the cookie cutter thing that like, it's easy, you get it done, people know what it is. But then I don't think we push anything forward or like engage deeply, and it feels, you know, like we're just following a formula, and those things I'm against, just
yeah. Or it's like supply and demand, or it's like, well, the money's there, so can you just make something because, you know, because we asked you to make something.
Yeah, I mean this speaks
what a great problem to have.
I mean, yes, but this also just speaks to like why the institution, like where money comes from in this country, is like, has always bothered me. It's like, you know, we actually don't give enough money to individual artists. We give money to organizations that then have to give money out to the individual artists, but then those organizations sort of box us, like they need to come up with a formula because it's so much work. So they're like, everyone's gonna get the same amount of money, same amount of time, same amount of resources, and the result is everyone looks the same because of that. Because we're not actually like being like, okay, what do you need and how do you need it? And what are the things that are gonna make your individual voice as an artist stand out? You have to take that on yourself as the artist, to be like, to push back and be like, okay, like, I see that you wrote this in your application and that this is the formula, but that doesn't actually support my vision. So like, I have to do this work to like pull out what I need from it. And that's the harder thing. But also I think an important thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great after party. Great after party.
Oh, we could just talk about this.
Yellow shirt after party.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about that. But we should probably let the people who are working this panel,
who have jobs now. Yeah, we should let them go. You're right.
We got nothing to do.
But you know, I think my last thought is, I think Lars was right. There's something about this Zoom stuff though that's like a drug, right? Like I'm actually having like great anxiety with hanging up because like I'm on such a high, right? Like I'm talking, I'm like communicating with people, my brain is working, and then I'm gonna like click this off and like hear the silence of nothing. Yeah,
thrust back into the void.
So yeah, push me out. Go ahead. I'm happy.
I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah. Oh, see, and that's also, so you're actually in the same exact place. You're like, I'll stay. I'm just gonna let you. Maybe Gregory will jump on and be like, okay, thank you, bye.
Yeah,
you guys cut us off. You guys get into it. I'm not a host, so I can't.
I'm not a host either. Technically I'm a panelist.
Oh, someone's gonna have to end this for us. We're the artist. I'll just like leave this on like a live cam. I'll just like go to sleep. I'll start watching TV. I won't end it.
The next great idea is born from the next Raja project is born. I got on this call.
Oh shit!
And it never got off.
I'm supposed to do some stuff. See, I'm starting to check my email.
Now it's real. Now it got real.
Shut us off, somebody. John.
Hey, Raja. Bye. I'm gonna leave now.
You're gonna leave? Are you gonna end?
Yeah, we could say 3, 2, 1, right?
Are you really gonna do it?
I'll really do it.
Okay, I'll really do it.
Trust me? Do you trust me to actually do it?
Should we touch hands? Okay, one.
This is where my hand is.
Oh wait, but put it in front of the camera.
Okay.
There you go.
Everyone who's still watching, we'll do it. Hover your mouse above the leave meeting button.
Yes.
And what? 3, 2, 1, 0 or 3, 2, 1 go or 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1, and then press because there's a little delay.
Okay, I'm really gonna do it. Are you gonna do it?
I swear I would never lie to you.
All right, you count.
Someone take a screenshot, please. Nathan, take a screenshot. Send it to me. Pause for the screenshot. Smile. I believe it happened. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
One, go.